know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome to Gloria Meets. It's the real me with Labour MP Kim Leadbeater. Her sister, Jo Cox, was murdered in 2016 while she was doing her job as an MP.
You've then got losing people through illness, you've got losing people through, all sorts of different circumstances. I think murder just gives everything a whole new dimension.
I've been to the marginal constituency of Ashfield in Nottinghamshire to get the views of voters there.
Which one would you rather see as Prime Minister?
Neither of them. And it's Shadow Leader of the House, Thangam Debbonaire.
We shouldn't have to tolerate the sort of wrongdoing that puts people in fear, that makes people fearful at work.
All that after your news.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 6. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. Police are still searching for the gunman behind yesterday's suspected drive-by shooting in central London. A 7-year-old girl remains in a critical condition after being shot outside a church near Euston Station. 4 women and a second child, aged 12, were also taken to hospital, with one of them suffering life-changing injuries. Police say shots were fired from a moving black Toyota as mourners left a funeral service. Superintendent Jack Rowlands is urging witnesses to come forward.
The suspects discharged a shotgun from a moving vehicle, which was a black Toyota CHR. We want to hear from anyone who witnessed the incident or has information about it.
At least 68 people have been killed when a domestic plane crashed in Nepal, the country's worst aviation disaster in 3 decades. 72 people were on board the Yeti Airlines flight that crashed in Pokhara during clear skies. Those on board included passengers from India, Ireland, Australia and France. All but 4 of the bodies have been recovered. The search operation has been paused until tomorrow morning. The Health Secretary has criticised the GMB union over what he calls a lack of patient and public safety during recent ambulance strikes. Steve Barclay wrote to the union saying voluntary arrangements which were put in place were not enough. It comes as anti-strike legislation which would require minimum service levels is due to be debated by MPs tomorrow. Last week, the GMB published an open letter saying ambulance staff felt demonised by the government. Sir Keir Starmer is calling for an overhaul of the NHS, saying it must reform or it will die. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, he says a Labour government would turn GPs into direct NHS employees rather than allowing them to run their own practices. He also announced plans to allow some patients, such as those with back pain, to self-refer themselves to specialists.
We'll double the number of medical students using money from abolishing the non-dom status for the super rich, but also we need to look at the way GPs operate and see whether we can't make changes there, things which will actually preserve the NHS going forward. The moment what the government's doing is really just presiding over managed decline, and that I will not accept. Of course there will be challenges whenever you reform something, but frankly, if you don't reform the NHS, then I fear it will die.
At least 30 people have been killed and 30 more are being treated in hospital after a Russian missile hit an apartment building in central Ukraine. Rescue efforts are continuing, with officials saying a further 40 people could still be trapped under the rubble. Yesterday, Russia launched a major missile attack on Ukraine, striking vital energy facilities across the country. Authorities say the coming days will be difficult, with threats to the supply of electricity, water and heating, all during the height of winter. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is asking government ministers to help persuade global allies to give more support to Ukraine and help break the stalemate with Russia. It comes after Rishi Sunak announced the UK would be sending 14 tanks to Kyiv. With the first anniversary of the war approaching, Mr Sunak is stressing the need for an international strategy. Former Major General Chip Chapman was head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. He told GB News Russia isn't backing down.
So it's really this shift in the red lines which will probably lead to other countries in the next 2 weeks also giving armour to the Ukrainians, which gives them this idea of a winning faster strategy in 2023. Of course, the enemy on the other side gets a vote in that, and it looks like the Russians are going to mobilise another 500,000 men this year on top of the 300,000 they mobilised in October. So there's a lot of hard fighting to come yet.
You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. We'll have more news as it happens, but for now, it's time for Gloria Meets.
Kim Leadbeater, I have been wanting to interview you for ages. I'm really thrilled to meet you, actually, because I haven't met you before.
No, well, that's very kind of you, but you do need to get out more.
We're going to talk about the circumstances which led to you becoming the MP for your hometown a little bit later. But can I ask you, had you ever thought about becoming a Member of Parliament?
Probably not in that clearer way of expressing it. I'd always been really interested in politics, and actually at primary school one of the teachers said, "Oh, Kim Leadbeater, one day you'll be Prime Minister," because I was pretty confident even at quite a young age. But no, I hadn't. Again, I'd sort of toyed with the idea. I actually started a degree in philosophy and politics when I was about 19, but I never finished it because the timing wasn't right and various other things. So yeah, I don't think this was the trajectory that I was going down.
And what has been the most unexpected thing about becoming a Member of Parliament?
I think the most challenging things are the difficulty of balancing the job in Westminster and the job in the constituency, because I actually think those are both two full-time jobs, and I think doing both of them well is really challenging if you do them both properly. And the other thing that I find really challenging is the range of subjects and topics which you need to keep in your head. And I find that quite frustrating. I remember someone actually during the by-election who was an ex-MP who said to me, "You're like a GP. You have to know a little bit about everything." And I think that's really true, and I really remember those words. And I find that quite hard because I'm actually quite a details person, and I would rather know, right, well, but why has this happened, and what's the background to it, and what's the story to it? And the reality is you can't know that about everything that you're expected to deal with. So those are the two most challenging things. So most of the stuff I don't think is a surprise to me, because I'd got an idea of what the job was like, having seen my sister do it, having seen other people do it, and having spent time in and around Parliament previously.
Okay. You've got a long-term partner. She's called Claire. Have you always had relationships with women?
Well, no, interestingly, and I don't think this is particularly in the public domain, but until I met Claire, I'd always had relationships with men. So, and I find this really interesting, actually, because I'm not a big labels person, and we spend a lot of time obsessing about labels, and I think it's also really important how people choose to identify. But I met Claire about 13 years ago now, and we've been together ever since. But prior to that, it wasn't even on my radar to even think about having a relationship with a woman. And I think sometimes that's what happens in life, isn't it? Things that you're not expecting happen, sometimes horrible, sometimes good.
Have you experienced homophobia? Have people treated you differently since you have been with a woman?
Very, very occasionally, I would say. Certainly never experienced homophobia, which I've had friends and colleagues experience on a horrendous scale, and friends and colleagues who came out as gay 10, 20, 30 years ago. I've certainly never experienced any of that. I do think there is a different way of people treating you, but not necessarily in a negative way, just maybe slightly different. I mean, my friends were gobsmacked. So my friends were like, "Oh my God, what's she doing now?" So they were really surprised, but not negative at all. Just like, "Bloody hell, Kim." You know, didn't see that one coming. But no, so I'm very fortunate. And I think that's really important to me as well, to make sure that My experience is my experience, but to understand that that's not everybody's experience, and sadly we do still see huge amounts of discrimination and homophobia, along with sadly lots of other abuse for people just being who they are. And that's an agenda that I'm really keen to sort of do more work on.
I'm going to take you back to June 2016, to the terrible day when your sister Jo Cox was murdered. God, I just got a shiver down my spine actually just saying that, because actually she was my colleague. I remember very clearly where I was when I knew something was wrong. The shock and pain that we went through as her colleagues, that's nothing compared to what you would have gone through. Tell me when you first heard something was wrong.
So I was at home on that day because it was, I think it's the European Football Championship, and we were at home getting ready to watch, I think it was England and Wales. But I'd taken my car in for its MOT at the garage just down the road. So I was trying to keep fit and healthy. So I said to Claire, I'll jog down, get my car, come back up and we'll watch the football. And then I remember just as I was getting close to the garage, my phone went and it was Jo's husband, basically saying that Jo had been attacked. And what is really weird is that as soon as I heard that, I knew this was not going to be good. And I just knew. And I remember I started shaking, and it's really weird, isn't it, how things have a physical manifestation on you. And I said to the guy at the garage, I said, he could see that I was shaken. And he said, are you all right, Kim? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. I've just had a bit of a worrying phone call. And I said, you know, my sister's the MP and I've just heard some news that she's been attacked. And he said, and I said, oh, it's Jo Cox, said you might have heard of her. And he went, no, Kim, I don't watch the news. It's too depressing. And I remember that conversation really clear. It's a lovely bloke, Steve, at the garage. And then I remember getting in my car, driving home. And then the rest is sort of quite a blur. Haven't revisited it very much. Haven't had any counselling, so let's make sure this doesn't turn into a therapy session. And I guess since that day, have just tried to put one foot in front of the other to keep going, mainly for my parents and mainly for Jo's children, but also, as you say, for everybody else who was affected by Jo's murder, and that's a heck of a lot of people. Colleagues, people in our local area whose lives were changed forever. And just to try and show that when the worst possible things do happen in life, and sadly they do to lots of people, you've somehow got to find a way to carry on. And that, I suppose that's what I've been doing ever since. And that doesn't mean I'd say I'm doing it particularly well, but I've kept going, and I'll continue to do that for as long as I can.
The grieving must be just a constant process. Does it change?
I think grief's really funny, isn't it? Loss is very strange, grief is very strange, and at the centre of any loss, it's a bit like an onion, isn't it? You've got losing that person, and then you've got the circumstances around that loss. And like I lost my grandparents at ripe old ages of 90s, and that was sad, but it wasn't tragic. And we were all upset, but we weren't devastated. You've then got losing people through illness, you've got losing people through, you know, all sorts of different circumstances. I think murder just gives everything a whole new dimension. And there's lots of other layers around what happened to Jo. Clearly, the political nature of her murder, the fact that it was taking place in a very toxic political environment and culture, the fact that it was news all around the world. So not only were we plunged into a world of loss and grief, but the world's media were on us as a family. Then we'd got the political climate and the situation that was going on there. So there were so many different dimensions, and then we had to go into the legal system, which I got no experience of at all. So suddenly you've got all these new worlds that you're sat in the middle of. And where does your grief sit within that? I have no idea. And if I'm honest, and I've said this for nearly 7 years now, I haven't grieved. I'm nervous about grieving because as soon as you open that box, you can't put it back in. Does that mean I'll never leave the house? Does that mean, you know, I won't be able to function? What does that grief look like under those circumstances? So I kind of haven't done that, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, and I think everybody's different. I wouldn't have blamed anybody if they'd just locked the door and closed the curtains and said, just leave me alone for the next 5 months, 5 years, however long. But I haven't done that. And I think Jo's children are a big part of that because they will obviously look back going forward about what happened, and I want them to see not just what happened, but I want them to see our response to what happened. And the fact is, as a family and as a community, and actually as a country in some ways, we've tried to do as much positive stuff as we can in Joe's name. And I think that's really, really important. And people do that all the time. You know, I've spoken to other families who've had members murdered and have lost members to illness. And, you know, one of your ways of coping is to do something positive. And I think it does keep you going.
What work could be done? Who should be leading it? What do we need to do?
I think there's lots of layers to it. I think there is the actual physical day-to-day safety of MPs, and a lot has changed in that regard, I would say. There's still more could be done, but a lot has changed. But the broader thing for me, Gloria, is around what our politics looks like, and by default almost what society looks like, and how we conduct ourselves around particularly difficult, contentious issues where we do disagree. And what does that look like so that we can have healthy, robust, passionate debates, but in a civilised and respectful manner. And since being in Parliament, you know, I see some of that done really well, and sometimes I sadly see it done less well. And I think, therefore, as political leaders, we have a responsibility to think about how we conduct ourselves. I think the media have got a responsibility and a role to play in terms of how they can create division and stoke division around contentious areas, or they can choose to be balanced and present, you know, different opinions and a different range of views. And also within that, respecting freedom of speech and respecting freedom of debate and discussion, which is really, really important. But freedom of speech and freedom to have your own opinions is not the same as being offensive or rude or horrible. And that's kind of like, but equally, we've all got our own line as to where that is, haven't we? So that's difficult.
Have you been subject to online abuse?
I've not done too badly since being elected. But I will be honest, part of that is because I don't tend to try and create a particularly high profile for myself. I kind of came into politics thinking I've already got enough people knowing who I am. And I know having a public profile is an important part of being an MP and being in public life, but I have consciously tried not to draw attention to things on occasions. And I've still been subjected to some abuse. I would say nowhere near as much as some colleagues have had, and I've spoken to many colleagues about their experiences, and it, you know, it's dreadful. But I have had somebody arrested.
Have you?
I have, yeah.
For social media or real life abuse?
This was email. Was email, yeah. I've had very little in real life. In fact, I don't think I've had any. And I think part of that is because when I'm in the constituency, people know me, people know my story, people feel comfortable enough, as they do every week, to come up and chat to me. And, you know, and I take that as a real compliment that people feel able to do that. But some of the things that people have been through, and this is what amazed me when I first came into Parliament, the fact that MPs would read off threats, abuse, online, offline, physical attacks on their officers, and they would read it like it was just a shopping list, or it was just this, and they'd come to accept it. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be in. But I've kind of found myself almost going into that, you know, area and the way of thinking about it. Well, it just comes with a job, but it shouldn't come with a job. It shouldn't come with any job. And that's the other thing is, you know, we see sadly at the minute we've got an NHS in crisis. We're getting doctors getting abused. We're getting nurses getting abused. Even shopkeepers, you know. And I think the broader point is, where is that anger coming from, and what can we do to try and help that anger be channeled into something good? And some of that anger, I'm sure, is about politics and about the state of the country, and I get that. I totally get that. But how can we do something positive with the way that people are feeling?
You mentioned that somebody had been arrested for sending you an email.
Yeah, there was. I mean, I don't want to go into details about it really, because what I try not to do is give oxygen to these things, because that's often what people want. Yeah. And that's the other thing about MPs speaking out about it. Two things really. One, I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I have chosen this, you know, kind of. But I have chosen this at some point. You know, MPs have chosen to go into public life. They've chosen to do our jobs. We don't want sympathy. We don't want pity. But I think it's also important that people understand the reality of what it's like to be an MP, or indeed a councillor. Councillors get this as well, or, as I've said, other careers, people in the media, you know, women in public life in a variety of different guises get abuse. But also what I don't want to do is draw attention to the people who do these things, because a big part of this is attention, and then you're doing their job for them, aren't you?
Interesting. Your sister was murdered as she was about to do a constituency surgery. How do you do your constituency surgery? Has it affected the way you do your constituency surgery?
Yeah, I think for lots of MPs, things changed after Joe was killed around engagement with the public. Some MPs still do open surgeries. I don't, and I never will. And actually, people in Batley and Spen fully respect that and understand that. I think, unfortunately, because of what happened to Sir David Amess, maybe other MPs have reviewed it in light of that.
Yes.
But you need to be accessible, and that's the balance, isn't it? That's the fine balance. And I want to be accessible. So we do a lot of, we'll do appointments where people will come to the office, but it's all pre-arranged. We'll do telephone calls. I do quite a lot of phone calls with people. Obviously, you can do a lot by email. So there are ways of communicating with people. You know, you don't have to do that open surgery. And I kind of get it, where some people will say, well, I want to be accessible to my public and all the rest of it, but then look at what can happen, and let's pray to whoever you pray to that it never happens again. But it's happened twice now, and that for me is enough to know that that is not the way of doing this job safely. I also take all the advice and help that I'm given from the police. West Yorkshire Police have been absolutely amazing, extremely supportive of me.
Coming up, more from Kim Leadbeater after the break.
Because the last thing I want is for my parents or partner or family and friends to get that phone call.
I've been to the marginal constituency of Ashfield in Nottinghamshire to get the views of voters there.
It's come up a little bit since we last spoke, but I still don't think he is a strong leader for the Labour Party.
Labour's Thangam Debbonaire.
We cannot let those people who want to frighten us stop us from doing our jobs, because democracy really matters.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
I read that you carry 3 panic alarms with you. This was about a year ago, I think. Is that still... It doesn't seem that safe to me, to be honest, a panic alarm, but...
Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 different alarms that we can use for various different things.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, one of those I would suggest I just carry just because I'm a woman. You know, one of those alarms where if anything happens, you just make a lot of noise. But then a couple of others are linked to the police. And it is weird that that's now what my life looks like. But equally, I would rather have them than not have them, because the last thing I want is for my parents or partner or family and friends to get that phone call that, you know, no one should ever have to get.
The by-election that you were a candidate in was pretty toxic.
I've had better 6 weeks.
Yeah, it was quite comfortable to watch, actually.
Yeah.
Do we protect candidates enough?
I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Probably not, but then we shouldn't have to. I think, and the big thing for me about people going into politics, and that was a massive decision for me to put myself forward. It was a very quick decision. Time will tell whether it was proved to be the right decision, but it was. But I didn't anticipate what happening, and that really did sort of, you know, come out of the blue to me. But why would any woman, young woman, someone from an ethnic minority, or anyone actually, want to put themselves in a situation where you are being shouted at in the street, you are getting abuse, you are, you know, people are sending messages about you on WhatsApp groups of which you know nothing about? Why would you want to put yourself forward for that? And also, and that worries me, because how are we going to get good people in public life? We've also seen a number of good people, and I would include your good self in this, step away from public life for various reasons, but safety and that sense of, you know, intrusion in your life is often quoted by people, men and women, but very much so women. Good people across the political spectrum. So, you know, candidates, yes, I think probably should get more protection, but what does that look like? Because again, the reason you want to be a candidate is to go out and meet people and be around people. This job is all about people. That's the bit of it that I really enjoy. So how do you get that balance between making sure those people feel safe, but can also put themselves forward in the way that they want? And I don't have the answers. I wish I did.
But you're going to continue to try and work through so that we get to a point, I don't know if there is such a point, that every member of Parliament feels safe going about.
Yeah, and I do think that is about society, and it's about culture, and it's about understanding, you know, the role of elected officials, but it's also about how we treat fellow human beings. Actually, if we get right down to basics, it's not even about politics, is it? It's about people doing their jobs. And again, whether that's police officers, whether it's doctors, whether it's journalists, whoever it is, that person is a human being, and they're going to go home to their family, and they're going to go home to their friends. And we sometimes dehumanise certain professions, and we dehumanise people depending on maybe what's going on in our own lives. And I just think we've got to really push back against that and say, you know, I'm meeting you as a fellow human being. You've got whatever's going on in your life going on, and I've got to respect that and try and understand that. And I try and do that in Parliament, I try and do that in the constituency, I try and do that in my life. But we sometimes lose sight of that human connection. And without that, you know, what else have we got?
Remarkable. I think you are a remarkable person. I'm so sorry for what you and your family went through. And just to sort of let people know what you said, I don't seek a high profile. I think I've been trying to get you for about a year to do an interview, so I can absolutely confirm that.
I'm actually quite shy. Although my mum and dad would never believe that. But the thing is, I'm not shy, but I am also building my confidence in this new world. And it is a different world. You know that. It is a different world. And I know I'm a good enough person to be in it, but you've got to build your confidence to feel that, you know, your voice and the voices of the people that you represent, you know, need to be heard.
I've loved meeting you. Thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It's good to be back with some familiar faces. Pat, who voted Labour all your life until last time when you voted for the Conservative Party.
I did.
We got a newbie. We got Gavin.
Yeah.
You also voted Conservative last time. You voted Labour in the past?
Once or twice.
Yep. Which leader was that under? Can you remember?
It was actually Tony
Blair.
Yeah, Tony Blair.
Fine. So a long while ago.
Yeah, I liked him.
Yeah. Catherine, who you voted for Boris Johnson last time,
Yes, I did.
Conservative Party,
Yeah.
but you voted Labour and Liberal Democrat in the past.
Yes.
Nikki, you are a lifelong Labour voter.
Yep.
Brilliant. This is a constituency which always elected a Labour MP at a general election, but last time it went Conservative, and you guys largely reflect that. So I'm going to put this logo down. It's the Labour Party logo. What does anybody think when I say Labour Party? What comes to mind?
Workers.
Workers.
Working
Should
party.
be workers.
Well, it should be working party.
It should be working party.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I don't feel it is.
No. I don't think it is now.
I think it's changing.
Yeah.
I think it's changing. I think it's going from being something that was mainly for those, the working class, that were workers, that were in factories and things like that. And we're now moving away from that, and it's actually developing itself, and it seems to be a lot more people higher up. Middle class, than it was before.
From my own perspective, it's the face of the party that makes the difference. And unfortunately, Starmer doesn't work for me.
We're going to come on to the individuals. We're going to come on to the individuals, but that's something that's come up before. This is the Conservative Party logo. What comes to mind? Conservative Party.
Old Boys Club.
Yeah, old boys club. Yeah. They only are.
Organisation.
I was going to say completely.
The rich for the rich, that's all they are.
Anybody else got any word association?
It's just organisation.
It's organised, yeah.
Well, if you look at the logo, it's scribble. So it doesn't look anything for me, saying that is a party to... You've got the labourers, the rose. Yeah. That's the squiggle. It doesn't really say anything
The
to
thing
me.
is with the rose, I associate that with England.
Yeah. Which of these parties do you trust most to support the NHS?
Who wants to start?
I don't think anybody.
Me personally, I'll go Conservative. I actually quite like Boris Johnson, and I was disappointed when they got rid of him. It must... Don't get me wrong, he was a bit of like...
Bumbling Boris.
Yeah, a bit of bumbling Boris, but get that apart. He was the only person I really trusted because he was somebody that I could associate with, somebody that I thought was strong.
Right.
I would if Boris came back, but I can't see that happening.
Right.
At this moment, nobody has even come and said anything.
The opposite. I don't want Boris back, I'm sorry. But I've seen way too many times that Boris has made slip-ups, mistakes, and it's cost people's lives.
I want you to tell me what you think about this man. What words come to mind when I show you a picture of Keir Starmer? He'd like to be our next
last
Prime
time, nobody ever really knew about him. I don't think we've seen enough. I don't think we've seen enough on the scene.
I've heard too much about his past. There's all that to do with things where he's been, is it a prosecutor or something along those lines? So in his legal background, I've got no time of day for him.
Catherine, what do you think, Keir Starmer? Word association?
I don't trust him at the moment because I just don't think he's strong enough. It's come up a little bit since we last spoke, but I still don't think he is a strong leader for the Labour Party.
What do you think about this man? Rishi Sunak?
Don't trust him.
No, I don't.
He's rich for the rich.
He's not a working
No, he isn't.
man. No.
I don't think he's got any idea. I don't think he's got ideas, but the authority isn't there. And
from Rishi Sunak, we're talking about now.
He's backed down on so many things since he's come in. Right, we're going to do this, but all of a sudden, no, he's not going to do it.
You see, he's only just come into it, but he's got people at the back of him telling him how he should be running it.
It's not standing his ground with them.
They've all got their own teams, whether you're Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak or whether you've been Liz Truss or anybody. They have their own teams and they can go into a job that half of the time they don't even know what they're on about. And it's that team that trained them what to do and what to say and where to go.
I think the problem's gone to the point where we've got one leader, two leaders, and neither of them have got a strong personality. It's the teams behind them that are running them, but neither of them have actually got that personality to go
What do you think about this man, Jeremy Hunt? Is your Chancellor?
I don't trust him.
Don't like him.
I know he's run his own business. I know he's made his own money and everything else. But doing that doesn't mean you're a good leader. It doesn't mean you're going to do the right thing for the everyday man.
Do you know who this is?
I've got a clue. Is she Conservative or?
I've seen the face. I can't remember who she is.
That side.
That's not Penny Morgan.
I don't think who she is. No.
That's Rachel Reeves. That's Labour's shadow and Jeremy Hunt. Labour's right. Okay, but I
That
can't.
says everything. We
I
don't know
can't
who she
ask
is.
what you think about her because you don't know her. Okay.
The issue I've got is if you look at all of these photos, okay, leaving her out of it because we don't really know much about her, which says something.
That says a lot.
Not one of them, when you look at them, has got the oomph to actually get the job done.
But you always vote. You've always voted since the time you were allowed to vote.
Yeah.
Which one would you rather see as Prime Minister?
Neither of them.
But I reckon you're going to vote again, and you've always voted either for
Gloria.
There's people behind them that says, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
Who would you rather see as Prime Minister, Gavin?
Him.
Rishi Sunak?
Yeah,
Fine.
because I've got no time D for him.
Catherine?
If we'd only got the two parties.
Well, might you vote for a third, for one of the small? Do you think you may do?
I think I may do, yeah.
Right.
But say it just depends on, if you're talking just those two, I'd have to go Rishi Sunak.
I'll tell you what we need is to say to Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, the door's there, walk in, sit down, talk to us.
Yeah. I think that is a fantastic invitation. Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer. I'm going to keep going back to the dog and parrot to get these brilliant people's views.
I'm sure Catherine will host
Come and join us.
Coming up, Labour's Thangam Debbonaire.
And I noticed a lump more or less sticking out of my right breast.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Thangam Debbonaire, what a fabulous name.
But Gloria de Piero, what a fabulous name.
It's not as good. You have the best name in Parliament. It wasn't the name you started out with.
Well, my dad's name was Singh. It was his surname. And my dad came over from India when he was 18 on a boat. And Singh actually means male Sikh, and I'm neither male nor Sikh. And so for a complicated set of reasons, it ended up being our family surname. But after my dad died, I felt like I really wanted to change my surname. And so in my first, I wasn't married, but my first serious long-term committed relationship where I was living with a person, I did change my surname to Debbonaire because that was their family name. And I'm really happy with that. I mean, it's a great name, isn't it? Debbonaire. I feel really lucky. I'm also part of a lovely tribe of Debbonaires. I've got lovely nieces and nephews with whom I share that surname.
Now, you were elected to Parliament in 2015. Why?
Well, I got more votes than the other person. I mean,
why did you want to stand?
I mean, it's one of those things. I had already worked as a domestic violence expert. I'd worked with violent men. I'd worked with abused women. I'd worked with children whose parents who were living with the domestic violence. I'd done all sorts of different things to do with domestic violence. And that doesn't naturally lead you, you'd have thought, to a career in politics. But I had come from a very politically minded family.
I'm interested that you worked with violent men. What did you learn? Was there a pattern that you...
What I learned as well was, yes, there are some extremely violent people who will probably never stop being violent. But there are a huge chunk of people with whom, if you get the right intervention at the right time, with the right carrot and stick, you know, there has to be a threat of a sanction or an actual sanction, but the opportunity, the carrot is, you will have a better life if you stop being violent.
Now, I said you were elected in 2015. Shortly after being elected, you were diagnosed with breast cancer. Tell me the moment you knew something was wrong.
I was in the shower about 3 weeks after I'd got elected, and I noticed a lump more or less sticking out of my right breast. And it's, I mean, first of all, I want to say to everybody, please, women in particular, get your breasts, learn to check your breasts, but also go and get your mammograms when you're called forward, please, 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 because that was quite late. It meant that I was stage 3, which is not as good as stage 1 or 2, not as bad as stage 4, but it's further on, and I'd stopped checking my breasts somewhere along the line. I think when you're a candidate, and I'd been a candidate for 3 years on top of a job, I'd lost track somewhere. And I remember thinking when I saw it, how did I not see that before? Really, genuinely, how did I not see that? But genuinely, seriously, checking your breast saves lives. That's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned was you can get through it. You know, the first time you hear the word cancer, I know for a lot of people it feels like it's a death sentence. Well, actually, with breast cancer, which is the most common form of cancer that women get, lots of us are going to get it. 1 in 2 people in their lifetime will get cancer. But actually, breast cancer has gone, in my lifetime, from a disease that you mostly die of fairly soon to a disease that you mostly survive for a good 10 years or more, that's kind of all you look at when you first get your diagnosis. Am I actually going to get out the other end? And I did. But it was tough. It's not the most fun you ever have, having chemotherapy.
And did you make any lifestyle changes? I read that you pretty much stopped drinking.
Yeah,
alcohol.
I did. Yes, I mean I hadn't ever drunk a lot anyway,
No, I don't remember.
No, and I didn't used to go to House of Commons bar. I have been since. I've relaxed a bit in the last few years. It's 7 years now, so I have relaxed a bit. But for the first few years, I just didn't drink. It was just simpler. It was a good way of keeping control of my weight, because weight is a risk factor with breast cancer. But also, I just looked at all the risk factors that there were for recurrence, and one of them is alcohol. And I just thought, well, that's an easy thing to cut out. As it happens, as time went on, like I said, eventually my specialist did say, I think you're fine now. But it was easier to relax a bit, but it's made me much more conscious. And then, of all things, I went from being the girl that always managed to skive off PE at the beginning of term, so that the PE teacher wouldn't write a report. You know about that, Gloria? So I went from being that girl to being the person who, 3 years after I finished cancer treatment, I actually did complete the London Marathon. I mean, I want to say I ran it. That would be slightly exaggerating the second half of the race, which is very much a sort of run-walk situation.
You're a very positive person, and the positivity oozes out of you. But when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, my goodness, that must take a knock.
Yes, and I think particularly yes, And I'd just been elected and I'd worked really hard to get elected, and I was really proud of the fact I'd got elected. And I got elected on my mum's birthday, and like my mum, being a Labour MP is that like you could not possibly do anything more to please my mother than be a Labour minister. But yeah, it was a shock. But also it's a shock that lots of people get every day, and I had a great breast cancer nurse, which thankfully most people will have, not everybody. I'd like everyone to have a breast cancer nurse like I did. And she, oh God, I still remember her. She was the person who, straight after I had diagnosis, said, now, okay, let's take you away. How much of that did you understand? Should we go through it again? Should we have a think about it? And she's the person that you ring up when you're feeling really down.
Now, you are a shadow leader of the House. Parliament's not been going through a great time. 15 MPs at the time of recording. Let's hope there's not another one in the next couple of days. From across the parties have had the party whips suspended from them. All but 2 of those MPs have been accused of personal wrongdoing, many connected to things of a sexual nature. Of course, several deny the claims. But what's going on here?
Well, I mean, before I came to Parliament, as I said, I worked with violent men. So from that professional experience, that taught me that usually, not always, but it usually happens from a feeling of entitlement, a feeling that you are allowed to do certain things, that you've got the power and you're going to get away with it. Now, I think that is changing in Parliament because, you know, you said they've been suspended from the party whips. Some of them are not able to come into Parliament or have certain restrictions placed on them. And we have a system now. When I first came to Parliament, there was no system. We do now have something called the Independent Complaints and Grievance System. I suspect it's a confidential system, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of those MPs weren't going through an investigation in that. But it matters to me that we're showing leadership, and as you know, I'm shadow leader of the House at the moment. If I ever do get to be leader of the House in government, one of the things I really want to change is to build on where we've got to and really improve, setting an example and saying that we should expect the best, the highest standards of behaviour from our representatives. People are not going to be perfect. MPs are human beings, but we shouldn't have to tolerate the sort of wrongdoing that puts people in fear, that makes people fearful at work. And that is happening in Parliament. It's not most MPs. I just want to be really clear here. There are 650 of us. But it's too many. When there's one, there's too many.
Yeah.
One's too many. We shouldn't expect that from MPs. I think we should have high standards for MPs, and we do have standards. And I want to strengthen those. I want to make sure that we can actually deal with people who are treating their staff or members of the public or another MP badly in a really strong way.
Coming up, more from Thangam Debbonaire after the break.
How can you not want to laugh when someone says they were ambushed by a cake?
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
When you get elected to Parliament, I mean, we're women, and you're called Ma'am, which is like the Queen. And he's like, goodness, I can't believe I'm called Ma'am. And, you know, people are quite... They treat you with respect. They listen, even if you've been boring, people listen to you.
I know. I mean, it's not the only job that's the case. There are quite a lot of jobs where if you're at the head of a big business or a big organisation, you are going to get the same sort of treatment. And I think that carries with it the same increased risk that anyone who already thinks quite a lot of themselves, you know, it's not going to happen to everybody. You know, you get elected just because somebody calls you Mom doesn't suddenly turn you into a person who treats people badly. But unfortunately, those few people who come with an attitude or already an attitude of entitlement will get that built up as a result of this. And what you have to do with that is make sure there are clear rules, clear consequences, and real leadership, which says this is up with this we will not put.
Have we got the clear rules that we need? Is it a work in progress?
Well, I think we've got good rules. Could they be stronger? I'm sure. I mean, I'm of the view that you should only ever strengthen the code of conduct of behaviour for MPs. It should only ever get stronger and more effective. I can't pretend that this is the perfect system because it's not. Some of the investigations have taken too long. Others have not. I do think MPs quite often will arrive in Parliament having campaigned hard politically without having had enough experience of how to manage a staff team and a budget and conflicting pressures, and most of your staff live hundreds of miles away from you, and you know, those are skills which can be learnt. Now you can learn them, or you can arrive without those skills and still not bully your staff. Like I said, you know, someone could call you Mum and you still don't have to treat them badly. You can learn, you can ask for help. There are now, again, more ways of being helped to be a better employer in Parliament, and I would like all MPs to take those up. That's something else I'd like to see more of.
And of course, MPs in their line of duty can be subject to abuse, harassment. I know you had somebody harassing you who was jailed. That was back in 2017. Have things improved for you?
I think overall, my experience of being an MP is most of my constituents are absolutely lovely. Yeah, I had that one case and it mattered to me because my staff were the ones who were having to pick up the phone. Really mattered to me to make sure that they felt safe. Most of the time I do feel, and I think I am, very safe as an MP. But there is abuse of MPs, and we have lost to murder 2 colleagues since I've become an MP. So the wonderful Jo Cox and the wonderful David Amess. And this is a classic example of how party lines sort of dissolve more often than people realise, because the sorrow and the grief for both of those people from 2 very different parties, 2 very different ideas of politics was genuine. And I wanted to think after Jo was murdered, this will never happen again, and then it did. And so I couldn't say it's got better for everyone because David was only murdered really quite recently. And it's an incredible testimony actually to Jo, and that her sister is now the MP, the wonderful Kim Leadbeater. You know, I mean, that's incredible. What a resilient, amazing, inspiring family. And I use Kim as an example because I think we cannot let those people who want to frighten us stop us from doing our jobs, because democracy really matters. Well, after both those murders, the public said, we are there for you. And that is the majority of my experience, is that most people, even if they don't particularly like politicians, they aren't abusive. And I'm proud of the fact that we pulled together as a community when that did happen to us. And I am glad to say that I do have some protection. I'm not going to talk about it, obviously. But I wouldn't want to have a political system where I could only go out with security guards. There are countries where that's the only way MPs can move around. I go to the same shops as my constituents. I go to the same GP surgery. I get to chat to people. People tell me their problems as I'm on the way to buy a pint of milk. That really, really matters to me. And I've got to just trust that there's enough respect, even when people disagree. It's easy for me to say, because it's a while since I last had a really serious threat. And I know a lot of people, particularly women colleagues, have had a lot worse.
Finally, let's end on a positive note. You often use humour in Parliament. On those green benches, my goodness, some boring speeches that go on in that place. Go on, give us your best gag.
Oh God, I know. I mean, I think recently I used a Craig David song to illustrate something the government was doing wrong. Like on Monday they did this, on Tuesday they did that, on Wednesday they did this. I don't want to tell you what they did on Thursday. I don't have. I find that there's quite a lot of material to work with. The last year in politics has given us some amazing moments that are sometimes so jaw-dropping. It's impossible not to turn them into a gag, in my view. I mean, how can you not want to laugh when someone says they were ambushed by a cake? And so there's been plenty of material. I'd love, actually, now you've challenged me, I really would like to learn how to just tell a gag. I've never been that good. I've got one from my childhood. Two eggs in a pan being boiled.
Yeah.
One says to the other, oh God, it's hot in here, isn't it? The other one says, wait till you get outside, they bash your head in. I know, it's lame, but it's a joke. I was 6.
And how old are you now? How old are you now, Thangam? Are you not going to tell me?
56. It was 50.
Oh my gosh, that joke has stood the test of half a century of time.
It's a terrible, terrible joke.
You've been a joy.
You too. It's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you, Thangam Debbonaire. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria.
Join me next Sunday at 6 p.m. for more political interviews with a difference.
Hello again. I hope you're enjoying your Sunday, but looking ahead weather-wise, and it's going to remain cold. There'll be snow for some of us, but also quite a bit of winter sunshine to look forward to as well. The reason for the cold weather is this area of low pressure to the east of us. That's allowing for our winds to come from the north, so cold Arctic air plunging across the UK, which is why it's going to be so cold. Notice this weather system waiting out in the west. That's going to fringe south coastal parts as we go through Sunday night. Otherwise, for many through Sunday night, yes, there'll be some clear spells, also some showery rain, sleet or snow across some northern parts. Could lead to something of an ice risk here, and snow showers piling in